Later this month, Steven Spielberg comes out with his latest film, Disclosure Day, so I'm reviewing every Steven Spielberg movie, and this is my review of The Terminal. This is one of those movies that is incredibly easy to watch and easy to like, even if I don't think it's one of Spielberg's stronger films. It's cozy, it's charming, and has a lot of heart, but it never quite reaches the emotional heights or dramatic depth that some of Spielberg's best work achieves. The premise is certainly unique. Tom Hanks plays Viktor, a man who arrives in the United States only to discover that a political revolution has happened in his home country while he was in the air. Because his country's government effectively no longer exists, his passport becomes invalid, and he finds himself trapped inside an airport terminal with nowhere to go and no legal way to enter America. It's the kind of high-concept idea that immediately grabs your attention, because you can't help but wonder how someone could survive in that situation. One of the movie's greatest strengths is its atmosphere. The airport becomes an entire world unto itself. Viktor slowly learns how everything works, finds ways to earn money, develops friendships with airport employees, and creates a routine for himself. Watching him adapt to his surroundings is genuinely entertaining. There is something strangely comforting about spending time in this environment. The movie has a warm, welcoming feeling that makes it perfect comfort food cinema. The comedy is also surprisingly effective. A lot of the humor comes from Viktor's culture shock and language barrier, but Spielberg and the writers avoid making him the butt of the joke. Instead, much of the comedy comes from his resourcefulness and the misunderstandings that arise as he learns English and navigates airport life. There are several scenes that had me smiling throughout the film, and Tom Hanks' natural likability helps sell many of the comedic moments. That said, Tom Hanks is actually one of my biggest issues with the movie. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I think he feels somewhat miscast. Hanks is a fantastic actor and gives a committed performance, but I never completely bought him as Viktor. There were moments where I felt like I was watching Tom Hanks doing an accent and playing a character, rather than disappearing into the role. It's not a bad performance by any means, but compared to some of his more natural and effortless performances in films like Forrest Gump or Saving Private Ryan, this one never fully clicked for me. The movie is also a little too sentimental for my taste. Spielberg has always had a sentimental side, and when it's balanced properly, it can create some truly magical moments. Here, however, the film occasionally lays the sweetness on a little too thick. There are several scenes I felt designed specifically to tug at the audience's heartstrings, and sometimes it can come across as manipulative rather than genuinely emotional. I found myself appreciating the film's optimism without necessarily being moved by it. Another issue is the story never feels particularly urgent. The stakes are relatively low compared to many Spielberg films, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but it does make the movie feel somewhat slight. Conflict is mostly centered around Viktor waiting and overcoming bureaucratic obstacles. While it's interesting for a while, the narrative occasionally loses momentum and starts to feel repetitive. The romance subplot is probably the weakest aspect of the movie. It never felt particularly believable to me, and it often distracts from the more interesting side of Viktor developing relationships with the airport workers. I found myself much more invested in his friendships and personal journey than the romantic storylines. Even with those criticisms, I still enjoyed watching the film. The Terminal is the kind of movie that leaves you feeling good afterward. It's pleasant, funny, and surprisingly relaxing. Not every movie needs to be an epic masterpiece, and there's value in a film that's simply enjoyable company for 2 hours. For me, it falls in that category of movies that I'm glad I watched and would happily revisit someday, but it's not one I consider among Spielberg's essential works. It's a charming little story with a unique premise, solid comedy, and a lot of warmth, even if it occasionally becomes overly sentimental and never fully reaches its potential. So for me, it gets a C, a 7 out of 10, and 3 out of 5 stars. It's good, but it's not great. It's pleasant and heartwarming, and it's easy to recommend, but it's not one of Spielberg's films that will stick with me.